This is the Maximus Rose Around the North Sports Show. The Around the North Sports Show highlights all amateur, high school, and collegiate sports in Sault Ste. Marie, Algoma, and Northern Ontario. We interview the greatest athletes and coaches from your backyard. Broadcasting from the True House Media Studio in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, here is your host, Jay Houslander.
Hello, Kevin. How are you tonight?
Good, and you?
Good. And yourself?
Good, real good.
So we have Kevin Kane on from Kane Hockey Management. Kevin's probably been around hockey, I'm probably saying 25, 30 years at least at different levels. Kevin, big thing coming in Sault Ste. Marie, or they're trying to get the U16AAA program here. And Tony and I were just about to start talking about that, and we thought we'd get you to join the questions and your thoughts.
Sure.
So, Kevin, Tony here. Just overall,
Hi, Tony.
Hey, Kev, there's been a lot of people talking about this team and, kind of things that have happened in the past with it. What are your initial reactions to them bringing back this team, and what do you think it needs to do to be successful long term?
Well, short term, the next year's team, I think, would be pretty good. Long term, I think, there's still some obstacles with numbers, but, it may turn into a situation where it has to be looked at year to year. But, I think it would be a disservice to not try to make this, a viable long-term team. And I think, in part, I think if they had the right people running the team, I think, that would be possible.
And Kevin, with the U18 program we have now, and then what their Sault Major is saying is they have to have enough numbers for U18 than the U16. Do we have enough players in town? Because I heard somebody sent me a message today saying if they don't have a minor midget team, 6 players are going to go out of town and play in Southern Ontario. Do we have enough players and talent to support both teams?
So I think what needs to happen is we have to look at the U18 program and figure out how can we retain players year to year. So, at this point, there wouldn't be 15-year-olds on that team. So we would be talking about 16 and 17-year-olds. So the big thing is I think keeping the cost down. And I think the other part to it would be an improvement in the league because, a big part of why players play U18 with the OHL no longer, there's still the option of getting drafted in the midget draft, but, maybe these players are more of a school orientated. I think it's important that those players get retained because they seem to be losing a lot of players to high school and to other things.
So, Kevin, you made a few suggestions there on how to do it and, putting the right people in charge. And obviously that's always a touchy subject about, who's going to run the team because there's so many different options out there in terms of coaches and different styles and things like that. What are some of the qualities that you think that the head coach should have of this team, and just to help to retain players like you're talking about? Because a lot of times, you hear people leaving because of a personality conflict with a coach or something like that. What type of person do you think needs to be there to run that team to make it successful?
Well, I think the big thing is whoever coaches them in Bantam, I think is probably the one person, if he's done a good job, that has the most opportunity to retain, the majority of the players. It's never going to be perfect. You're always going to lose a player or two that's unhappy. But retaining the majority of players from your Bantam year to their minor midget year is imperative. And if we have, 4 or 5 leaving every year to go somewhere else, well, then, it's not going to be viable. Personally, I'd like to see a 2-year term where a coach starts with them in Bantam and then follows them to midget, minor midget, and then they flip, back the other way. So you have the same coach for the 2 years, and if they do a good job and if they, have run the team well, they're going to retain those players for their minor midget year.
And I use Kevin, and I maybe it's a Sioux Major unspoken rule, but we'll use Dom DeLuca and Terry Chitteroni are the coaches now, and it's not a rule, but over the years it's always they flipped back and forth. You go minor Bantam to major Bantam, and then flip this third year. So would you add a third year so that you have more or less 3 years of coaching?
I'm not sure I would do 3. It seems a long time with the same voice, and it may not, ultimately it may not be great. I think I'd personally like to see maybe the 2-year flip be from major Bantam and minor midget. But, you mentioned Mr. Chitteroni, and, and the people that I've spoken to, and this is not going to be popular either, but he's probably the most qualified and the most able to keep that group together, because as a group, they can be successful in minor midget. There's no question. If they were to lose 4 or 5 players, then they're not going to be.
Totally understandable.
So, but the elephant in the room, unfortunately, is the retention of players to play U18. Because, as Sioux Major has said, and it's a steadfast rule that in Hockey Canada, you must have U18 to have U16. There's no way around it. So the retention of players to play U18 to me is critical, and that's really, I think, where they need to be pouring a lot of the resources to ensure that we can get the players that are playing, as an example, on the U16AA team, the U18AA team, to get those kids to be playing U18 AAA. And I think that's where the big difficulty is going to be, is to ensure the appropriate numbers for U18. And the other problem is it has to be done very early, because players are going to leave if there's not going to be a U16 team at AAA. There's no question about it.
Yeah, and that was my next question, Kevin, was along those lines. How is this going to be sustainable long term? I know we talked about retention of players, but every single year it seems like there's discussion. Is this team going to happen? Is this team not going to happen? Is this coming from a leadership standpoint at Sioux Major, or what do we need to make this a permanent thing so every year people aren't asking, hey, are we going to have a place to play next year? Do we need to move?
Well, Tony, I think the big thing is it has to be somebody in the hockey world that looks at the major Bantam team at the end of the year and looks at the group as a whole and says that this team can compete at minor midget.
Yeah.
There are going to be years when that's not going to be possible. Some age groups are stronger than others, and at that point, 3 years from now, the team may not be strong enough to do it, and the 2 or 3 elite kids from that team may have to look elsewhere. But to me, it has to be looked at year to year, and it has to be analyzed from somebody not on a coaching staff of one of the teams, or maybe not necessarily an executive member. It has to be somebody that can look at the team and say, yes, this group can be competitive at minor midget in Southern Ontario, or no, as a group, this team can't compete, and this won't be a year for minor midget.
Yeah, I agree with that actually completely. I love that idea. The only other question would be, would NOHA continue to issue cards on a year-to-year basis, or would the NOHA finally get sick of it and say, no, this you can't keep going back and forth?
once you receive cards for a given team, you can request a leave for a year.
Okay.
Those cards automatically go back to you again the following year. You can request a leave again. So where this becomes difficult, Tony, is that in a year when the Sioux doesn't have a team, well, now in Northern Ontario, there's an imbalance. So to give you an example, like Sudbury announced this week that next year they were going to have to go back to Nickel City and Sudbury, each operating a U18 team at the AAA level and U16 at the AAA level. Well, if the Sioux were to get involved in their U16 program and it's stuck, then you go out and like Thunder Bay plays in the GTHL. So you need to have a league with 4 members in it in order to be considered a league. So maybe Thunder Bay, the Sioux, Sudbury, and North Bay could get together, be a division of the Great North League, the minor midget division, whatever, and set up a schedule of like 24 games, and then that would allow those minor midget teams to play all the tournaments they wanted. And it would allow them to have a league. If you don't have a league, they won't give you cards. So that's the issue right now. In the NOHA is there aren't 4 teams to operate. Once the Sioux is in for next year, if that happens, then that would create another team. But it's still a difficult proposition unless you can get others like Thunder Bay to get involved with you, and which would make it viable even in a year potentially when the Sioux wasn't in.
But I use, Kevin, and I'm being the devil's advocate here. Sudbury, we'll use North Bay, for instance, would approximately be 14 hours. Sudbury would be 12 hours. Do you think they would jump at the chance to have Thunder Bay in a league like that?
Well, here's the problem. Thunder Bay flies to every game.
Oh, wow.
They don't have home games.
Yeah.
They fly to every game. It costs a player on this year on the Thunder Bay minor midgets or major midgets $18,000 to play. So imagine a 24-game schedule where all you had to do is make one trip to Sudbury, one to North Bay, one to the Sioux. You could play showcases in each of those centers one weekend where they'd get 3-4 games in every weekend, and then allow teams to go to tournaments. It's going to cut the cost of Thunder Bay probably from 18 to 12, and it might increase the northern, like Sudbury, North Bay, whatever, for one trip to Thunder Bay, which I don't think is going to hurt. But it will also open up the schedule to be able to play all the major tournaments that there are.
That's amazing. The way you describe it, Kevin, it seems so common sense, right? So you kind of like to see something like that. Is that in the works at all, or is this just kind of your suggestion?
This is just my angle on this. I've been asked this a few times, and I had discussions with a couple people that a couple parents from the major Bantam team have called and asked, just my thinking, and again, this isn't brain surgery. This is just trying to ensure we develop as many players as we can on any given year without overlooking the fact that there are going to be years when things are not going to be as we, in a perfect situation, where a group may be weaker one year, where it's not a possibility, and, it's not going to happen. And at that point, those minor midget people can choose to move and do whatever they're going to do. But in order to keep people here, the Sioux's been a hockey mecca forever and ever and ever, and there's no reason why we can't get back to having numbers and being able to, field teams the way we used to. to me, it goes back to the year when the midgets folded after they hosted the TELUS Cup.
Yep.
No reason for it aside from an ego thing. Team wasn't going to be great. They were all done their TELUS Cup. They went out with a bang, and then boom, folded. So, to me, it no longer was about players. It was just about the organization and the people running the team. Now our focus needs to be more on how are we best serving the players in order to keep players playing in Sioux Major, as opposed to leaving to go play high school or do whatever.
Oh, that's great, Kevin. We appreciate you taking the time to explain this to people, because there's a lot of questions about it, and obviously with your expertise, it's just nice to get your opinion, and I think you're spot on with a lot of your points. Talk a little bit about what you're doing nowadays. So obviously you're kind of taking hockey on in a different role nowadays. Just talk a little bit about what you're doing for hockey nowadays, and what kind of what you can bring to the table if people are looking at hiring you to help them out.
So my post hockey, I guess,
Other than the golf
turned
course.
into my fun. Yeah. So my post hockey time, one of the things that I enjoyed most about my job running Thunderbirds and coaching and whatnot over the years was, players getting an opportunity next level and doing whatever they could do. And so after I was done with the Thunderbirds, it just kind of fell into my lap naturally, what I'm doing now, and that's the family advising. And so I work with players various ages, ideally to start around 14, 15, and just try to help them maneuver through the pitfalls and some of the do's and don'ts, and to try to, mold a player to try to get them to where they want to get to. And that's basically, I work with the player and the family, and it's rewarding. I'm going to be honest with you. As I tell people when I talk to them, whether I take you on or I don't, I'm still going to eat tomorrow. This is not what I do for my living. But the rewarding part at the end is when it turns out really well for people and players and families. And so, it really is a rewarding kind of, job. And I treat it as such because, players put in a lot of effort, and I need to match that effort to try to help them. And that's, I think, why I've succeeded to this point.
And Kevin, again, we could talk for hours about your Kane hockey management, but so people know, what's the difference between what you do and a hockey agent?
So there's very little difference aside from if you want to play college hockey in the U.S., Division I hockey, you can't take what they call free service. So family advisor, it's what they call pay for service. So you're not getting any undue benefit. But I also have players that fall on the other side that ultimately end up in the OHL. But when you get started, you never know where you're going to wind up. You don't know what path you're going to end up in. But if you do end up in school and you haven't paid for service, you're basically ineligible if you were to have a problem. So that's basically the difference. Is with an agent, he may take you on in the hope that you become a pro at some point, but you're not really getting what I would consider to be real work, because you haven't paid him. And so their incentive to help you and to work with you really doesn't exist until you become a pro. And I work with kids much younger than that are trying to get there.
And how would people find you, like you say now, online or wherever? How would they contact you if they were looking for an advisor? My
email is Kane at Kane Hockey Management. It's pretty simple. Lots of people know who I am. My number is out there. People are welcome to call. And again, I'll say this, I tell everybody this, there's no charge to call and ask questions and pick my brain. That's what I'm around for. I've been around for a long time. So certainly there's nobody needs to feel compelled to do anything. It's a simple conversation. By all means, I'm welcome. They're welcome to call.
And that's Cain, Cain, for those just tuning in and who don't know Kevin.
And the last thing, Kevin, it shows us something about our hockey coming in April 12th to the 16th. We're streaming the U15 AAAs here, but that's huge for Sault Ste. Marie and having the U15 provincials here in April, isn't it?
Yeah, because these U15 AAA kids that are kind of out front of our, what we've been talking about over the last couple of weeks, will have the ability to show just how good they are. And with the competition coming in, and they'll be able to show everybody that they would be very, very competitive in U16. And we need to do everything that we possibly can to try to help the group, make it a reality. And again, the only way we can make it a reality is if we work hard at the U18 level to attract some new players and to retain some of the ones we already have. So it's really, really important that we do all we can for the young players. Living up north, we're at a disadvantage, right from the start. But that only means we should be working that much harder to try to help them.
And the other thing is our minor Bantam teams going to the Ontario Winter Games representing Northern Ontario in March in Renfrew too, right?
Right. And so, hockey's been, this year is a really, really good year. The U18 team is really good. I've watched the U16 Michael Gagne's team, lots of good players that could play AAA U18 next year. Really good team. The major Bantams are a wagon. Mr. Chitteroni's team is a wagon. Lots of really high-end players there. So this is a really, really strong year for us. And so it's nice to see that teams will get an opportunity at the end of the year. Look, the Thunderbirds are really good. It's a boom year in the Sioux for hockey, and we need to somehow keep that momentum going.
Well, Kevin, I can't thank you enough for taking some time, and hopefully we can do it again, maybe come in the late fall, late spring.
No, absolutely. Appreciate Tony. Tony's a legend, and from my Thunderbird days, Tony. I can't speak highly enough of Tony. What a great guy that you have with you, and they do such a great job with this online stuff and doing the play-by-play. Guys do a great job.
I really appreciate that, Kevin. Thank you so much, man, and appreciate everything. And we got to get you in studio next time for sure. So look forward to it.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Kevin.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Take care.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, can't thank enough for Kevin for taking the time, and Tony, let's just base a little bit. You're in the penalty box with the Sioux Greyhounds, but you've been at the last couple games. Let's touch base with that before we have one more unexpected guest come on.
Well, first of all, I just want to say something about what we just talked about with Kevin. I think it's interesting to get that insight, right, from somebody who's kind of at an arm's length away. And you know what? The way Kevin kind of broke that down, it just makes logical sense, right? It just seems logical, right? But so oftentimes in hockey,
going into it, I thought the other way.
Conversation. Me too. And he has an interesting way of kind of explaining it. Obviously, the logistics and things are things that need to be talked about, but we talk about it all the time, right? There are some outstanding hockey minds in Sault Ste. Marie, unbelievable the amount of hockey minds we have here. We also have quite a few hockey egos in town, right?
True.
And it's tough to get all those bodies to work together and work in the same environment, and it's a little bit frustrating. If there was somehow a way to just get all these great minds in a room together, put all the BS aside, and get along, exactly, put all the BS aside, have a guy like Kevin who's well respected almost kind of be the chair of it, And I think the Sioux can come up with some pretty, solid ideas as to how to make this long-term
Long-term work, right?
long-term work. Absolutely.